Thanks everyone for watching. I'm really excited. We have Dr. Melanie Goble here. Dr. Melanie Goble grew up in southeastern Wisconsin, and she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian from the age of 4. She has her degree in psychology and graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2005. She worked in small animal medicine in Maine and Wisconsin for almost 10 years, and then began providing relief services to allow veterinarians to take time off to renew themselves in body, mind, and soul. Dr. Melanie and a group of colleagues founded the nonprofit Not One More Vet in 2017 to address the issues of suicide and mental wellness in the veterinary profession. She mentors veterinarians and provides veterinary care around the world with Christian veterinary missions. She travels, spends time with her husband. She's licensed in many, many states and has traveled all over the world. And her motto that she says is, "We all do better when we work together." Dr. Melanie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I do have so many questions for you. Um, you're just, somebody that I know and really admire and want to get to know you better. So I think we'll just start at the beginning. So you wanted to be a veterinarian from a young age, as we know from your bio. Was there a specific moment or experience that solidified your passion for this profession or made you want to be a veterinarian?
So my early experiences, so I grew up going to church. I'm a Christian, and my parents are two different denominations, so it made things lots of fun. But at my mom's church, we had Grandma Gherkin, and everybody called her Grandma Gherkin, and she helped injured birds. And so I would go over to her house, and I was like so enthralled that she would take care of these injured birds. And I mean, this was the early to mid 80s. So, like, there was no rules about this, at least as far as I knew. And it just was amazing. And one day we had a grackle that had flown into our window and fell down into the window well. And I'm like, no, the poor bird. And like, I got it and I wrapped it all up. And I'm like, we have to go to Grandma Gherkin. We have to make it better. Like, I didn't actually know there were vets, like that there were specific doctors for this at the time.
Mhm.
So even though we had pets, like my parents were not. I mean, there it was the typical like 1970s, 1980s. They got their rabies vaccines, maybe got spayed or neutered, cats
Mhm.
stayed outside, like all that kind of fun stuff. So there wasn't a lot of exposure to it at that point. But I'm like, I just want to be a doctor for animals. And like not realizing that was actually a job.
Mhm.
And I don't work with birds. um, Working with Grandma Gherkin was absolutely amazing. And then when I was 4, so I was born with a heart murmur and had I had EKGs done twice a year from the time of my birth. And when I was 4, it was Valentine's Day, and we went to the hospital, which is where the EKGs were done. And I'm sitting there, and they put these clamps on my wrists and my ankles to hold me still. And it was just my mom and I in the room at the point, but they had me all clamped down. And I was like, "What are these?" And my mom looked at me and it's like, "Well, I don't know." Like, I don't know if they have a special name because she knew I wanted the medical name for it. Like, I wanted
Mm.
that information, even at the age of 4. And she goes, "Well, you'll have to ask the doctor when they come back in." And I looked at her and I said, "But that's your responsibility." And she was like, "Okay." And they gave me little chocolate hearts wrapped in red foil for that visit. Like, that's my earliest memory,
Mm.
outside of like, that's my earliest personal memory, I should say. Um, so it started with medicine. and and then following up with Grandma Gherkin and just exposure to animals and all of that through the years.
That's such an amazing story. I mean, I think so often we hear about, people who have dogs and cats and they're exposed to the vet. But you had kind of a different approach, and then you had your own like childhood experience with medicine, which I wonder how that affected the way you practice medicine, or any type of level of empathy that you might have, or if you feel like those childhood experiences might affect the way you practice now.
Well, I would say not just my childhood experiences, but even my adult experiences have definitely affected my practice and my empathy and compassion for clients and patients because um, I've had a lot happen. Excuse me. um, so in I've never been a super healthy person. Just it's never been in the cards for me. So I was bedridden when I was in seventh grade for a while, and my knees were the size of those like mini basketballs that you get
Mm.
like at as souvenir type stuff. And I couldn't walk. And then they gave me a medication and I had an anaphylactic reaction to it. So I rolled off of the couch where I'd been sleeping and then I army crawled to the other room, not being able to breathe because I couldn't call for help. And I was like,
Mm.
and then my mom was on the phone and she's like, oh, something's wrong with Melanie. I need to go. And then she called the nurse line and they're like, oh, give her some Benadryl. And I was like, okay. Turns out my sister is allergic to Benadryl, so they stopped carrying Benadryl in the house after that. And I was like, but I'm like allergic to everything else.
Right.
But so I had that experience as a kid. I had an appendectomy when I was in second grade. Like I was sent to school with appendicitis for a week. And like I'm like, I don't feel good. They didn't believe me. So it wasn't until I puked all over the school. And then I went to the doctor and they told me I had the flu and sent me home. And so then a couple days after that is when I ended up going into the ER on emergency and had an emergency appendectomy.
Oh my gosh.
uh, and then I had my tonsils and adenoids taken out in seventh grade, and that was after 6, 7 years of tonsillitis. And instead of being in and out same day, I was hospitalized for 3 days. And like I just had all that kind of stuff. And then I had my eye pop out during vet school because of a migraine.
Pop out
like
like what we would see in a
like a
brachycephalic dog.
three, it was like a 3 millimeter exophthalmos. So like it wasn't a ton, but it hurts. Like
Yeah.
these little dogs with bulgy eyes. I'm like, how do you survive? Um, so I had that happen during vet school. And then they told me I had it happened because of a brain tumor. Like they're like, we think you have a brain tumor. You need to have an MRI, and then you need to see a neuro-ophthalmologist. And the neuro-ophthalmologist was like, "No, you just had a migraine. You're
Oh
fine."
my,
And then and then in 2009, I was having issues, and I go to the doctor, and they're like, "You're fine," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And so she like completely blew me off, and I called to get in with an internist, and they're like, there's a 6 week wait. And I'm like, I might be dead by then. And they're like, well, what's going on? And I told them what was happening. And they said, well, let me call you back in a few minutes. And they called me back like 2 minutes later. And they're like, can you come in tomorrow? And that's when I was diagnosed with diabetes insipidus. And, and then they told me, then I was told I had another brain tumor. And 3 months later, they called and said, oops, just kidding. We misread your MRI.
oh,
So all of those things have definitely influenced who I am as a doctor.
what a story. Yeah, I can imagine that all of those would really influence, and it's not surprising to me because I know that you are so empathetic and compassionate, and I think that is seems like a natural progression given everything that you've been through. And I just what a story. You just never know what someone is going through because we see all of your accomplishments and what a successful career you've had, and you just don't know. So I really appreciate you being like open and vulnerable about it because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Maybe not every last one of those things because that was a lot.
You
But
know,
many things in there. So I really appreciate you sharing those things. Did any of that, so you were in practice, you had said for about 10 years and then moved into relief. Was relief, did that have anything to do with some of these health issues you had? Did it provide you more flexibility around your well-being, or how did you move into relief?
no, so actually, I ended up in relief because I got fired from a job with no warning, no explanation, and no, like, they came in and they're like, you're fired, pack your things, no reason, no cause, like nothing. And I realized that I didn't feel like I actually had stability as an associate
Mm,
when you could get fired with like with nothing.
yeah.
and, and yes, I ended up getting unemployment for a little while, but I have a very firm belief that when something happens, like don't make decisions right away.
Yeah.
But I give myself 3 days to freak out, and then I have to come up with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of slows down some of the freaking out later. Um, but that's what I did. I just gave myself just 3 days to just be like, well, what am I going to do? I'm the sole income for my family. I need health insurance. Like, what am I going to do? And um, I ended up talking to a couple of friends and to some distributor reps and said, what do you know of anybody that's hiring or that's looking or whatever? Like, I don't even know what I want to do. Like, do I just buy a clinic? Like, suddenly, as if you can do that, like in 24 hours notice. And one of my friends said, hey, I need somebody at my clinic. And the distributor rep said, oh, I know this clinic that they're having some issues and they need somebody. And then because of getting unemployment, I had to apply for 3 jobs a week in order to be eligible for
Mm.
unemployment. So I applied for relief jobs.
Mhm.
And eventually I ran out of all of the clinics in Wisconsin that had ads out. So I started just going through the AVMA job section. and, and that's how I ended up in the Virgin Islands.
Wow.
So I lost my job on September 11th of 2013. No, 2014. And October 17th is when I officially started my LLC. And then I ended up in the Virgin Islands just after Thanksgiving
Wow.
for the month of December of that year.
What a story and what
So,
a lovely place to spend a December. That sounds amazing.
yeah,
And I'm just marveling at the fact that a veterinarian could have been fired. It just seems like so far-fetched in this world of the current veterinarian shortage crisis that we're having. It's such a different world. And it's also such a different world for relief, just to see where relief is now 10 years later. That
right.
you had to go to look at the AVMA job boards and I mean, now people are just chomping at the bit to get relief veterinarians. I'm
Oh
sure you're
goodness,
just,
yeah.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to turn down 2 people today that contacted me for relief for next year already
Wow.
because I have next year completely booked, or
Wow.
this year, I mean.
That is
Um,
amazing.
and so yeah, it was a kind of a wild ride, and I love it though. I love doing relief and I love being able to travel, and it's
Yeah,
just
it sounds like it suits you, and I
it
definitely
does.
want to hear more. I am curious, of course, about the origin of Not One More Vet, because somewhere during this time, you and colleagues created Not One More Vet, and I wonder if you can tell, like,
Yeah.
we know that that's made such a positive impact on the mental well-being of our profession, so thank you for that. It's such an important gift. When I was at, VMX, everybody was walking around with their NOMV tags on their on their badges. And so it's just made such a huge impact. We hardly even remember a time in vet med before Not One More Vet. So can you just talk about the evolution of that and what you see as the positive impact that that's making on our profession?
Yeah. So Not One More Vet started as a Facebook group. I did not start that. But that was started on September 1st of 2014, after the death of Dr. Sophia Yin. And Dr. Nicole MacArthur was talking to some friends and just texting and was like, wow, I'm not the only one that feels like I'm drowning and that I can't do this and that it's just too much and the stress of it essentially. And so she decided to make Not One More Vet the Facebook group, just as a place for vets to talk about the highs and lows of vetment and just to know you're not alone. And that I was actually added to the group 2 weeks later, by someone that I met in a writing group that was
Mm.
also a vet. And so she lives in Kansas and I live in Wisconsin. We had never met in person, but she's like, hey, I think you'd really like this. And I did. And then in August of 2016, they were like, we are drowning in requests of people wanting to join. So I
Mm,
said, well, I can help with that. I'll just sit in the background and just do membership stuff. And we have a very strict policy of you have to be a vet. And so we had to literally vet every person that was coming in.
wow.
And at the time, they didn't have join questions and things like that for Facebook groups.
Yeah.
So you had to message them individually to find out, one, is it their real name? Where do they live? Like if it wasn't
Mm,
listed on where they live and work and things like that. And then we had to go, well, when I say we, at this point, it was just me because I was the entire membership team
mm,
at that point. And I would go in and I would look up everybody in Wisconsin, everybody in Illinois, and or I'd have people send me a copy of their license or their diploma.
wow.
Um, and I was adding anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 people a week to NAMV.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so I'm working full time and traveling and doing all of like getting all these people in. Now we have a nice team of people that, we take turns and we help each other. Um, and then we realized after I came on that I was like, okay, we're finally starting to get caught up. And they're like, well, you're helping with this other stuff. So you have to stay on the admin team. I'm like, okay.
Mm,
And you can actually help with other things now. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Um, and then we realized that there was a need for more than what the group could provide. So we needed more than just a place to talk.
mhm,
And we started Not One More Vet Inc., the um, business or the nonprofit. We incorporated in February of 2017 and got our official 501c3 designation in May of 2017. And we started basically so we could provide grants to people to get help, that
mm,
people that were in crisis. And so the first grant that we had was actually to pay for a relief vet so that a vet could go to treatment.
wow.
Um, so that was kind of how that started.
Ooh,
And then now it's huge. Now there's, before COVID, we didn't have any employees, and there was 5 of us volunteers that made up the board. And then we added a few more people to help with the forums on Facebook. And I did almost all of the background stuff.
mm,
So in order to have a 501c3 and to collect donations in different states, you have to be registered with all of these different states. So I was, after work and after forums and after membership and all of that, I was making sure that we were staying legal. We eventually hired a company to do that. And when we hired them, they were like, you did what?
mm,
And I'm like, well, I have about 30 of the 40 or so states done, and we're registered. And like you could hear the guy's jaw hit the table over the phone
mm,
because that's a full-time job.
right. Yeah.
And he was just shocked that we had done that much already. Um, anyway, so we did that. And then once COVID hit, we hired our first employee. And now there's 10 employees and we have hundreds of volunteers around the world. We have chapters all over the world. Like it's crazy.
Wow.
I eventually did have to leave the board for my health because I had so many things happening and I
Yeah.
just couldn't do that. I couldn't do as much anymore. So I stepped back. I still do the membership stuff and I still help in the forums and I still lecture and I still do all the other things. I'm just not on the board. Um, yeah.
What an amazing journey. I knew, like a little bit about that origin story, but I certainly didn't know who the first grant was for. And that just, gives me chills to see where it, started and where it is now. Did
Yeah,
you?
and I think, I haven't seen the final numbers yet, but I believe it's over $250,000 that have been given out to individuals,
Wow.
veterinarians and staff. that are in crisis, and the average grant is around $600.
Wow.
And it's at this point we've had to limit the grants to housing and food,
Whoa.
and we're still giving $250,000 a year for that. And then we also have the national or the natural disaster grants for
Mm.
clinics. Um,
Mm.
and that is, let's see, I think they've refilled the funding for that twice this past year, maybe three times.
Mm.
Um, but that's funding for that is provided by AmerisourceBergen, and they are amazing.
That's
They're just like,
incredible.
yes, here's more money. Like we're like, hey, we ran out of money, we need more. And they're like, okay, here's more money.
Wow. And I
So,
don't think the public would really know that. It seems
right.
like that might be something they're doing either behind the scenes, or if their name is there, it's not, something that's really very much publicized. And what an amazing gift and, service that you guys are providing.
We publicize it, but I mean, it's not what people think of when
No,
they think
not
of
at all.
Healthy. But there's so much more than just the Facebook groups.
Yeah.
This is something I think everybody should know about, is there is also something else called Lifeboat. It is a 100% anonymous peer-to-peer support group where you go
Oh.
in and you get matched with a group of people. So it's you and like three or four other people. And there's peer mentors, and then behind the scenes, there's mental health support.
Mm.
So they can't actually be in the groups because of HIPAA and licensing laws and all of that.
Okay.
Um, but we are able to get a lot more support to people.
Yeah.
And that is a huge program. And there's the Clear Blueprint, which is a certification program for clinics, to actually show that you're walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
Mm.
And it's a living certification, so you don't just get it and pay for it. You actually have to earn it, and you have to keep earning it.
And keep earning it.
And
I love
that's
that.
pretty cool. Yeah,
There's so much to this that I don't know that I knew. And I think information that we can definitely make available to, certainly the mentees in our program and the other mentors and the people in the Ready Vet Go community. So this is
right.
just incredible. These are really
That's
great resources. So we make sure to post those.
Oh yeah, we can put them in the resources section of the community. I was just
Exactly.
looking at that today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to talk more about your travels because you're so well
Yeah.
traveled. So we know that when you first got into relief, you went to the Virgin Islands, but I think
Mhm.
Mongolia is in your bio as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how are you doing all of this international travel, and how has your international experience sort of changed, or has it affected your perspective on how you practice?
So going to Mongolia was with Christian Veterinary Missions, and I've gone twice. I was supposed to go again in 2020, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I learned so much. So when I was there, it was kind of surreal. So let's see, this would have been the first time I went was 2014. And it was actually, I got back a week before I got fired, or 2 weeks before I got fired. Like, it was super annoying. Anyway, I go over there. So I drive to Chicago. I fly from Chicago to Seoul to Ulaanbaatar, get in at like 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and get to the apartment around 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm at the clinic at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I am like so jet lagged. It's like 24 hours flying and layover in Seoul. And I walk in and they're like, can you do a thoracocentesis
Oh.
on a small cat? And I'm like, yes. Like, I had not done one before, like, or not like since vet school. And I had been out for like 9.5 years at this point. But I'm like, yeah, okay, so I'm here to mentor and teach. So let's get the book out and go through this so we know where to look and like how to follow the directions. I'm like, okay. And like we do this thoracocentesis on this cat and pull out tons and tons of blood from the cat's chest. They don't
Mm,
have euthanasia solution in Mongolia. So like euthanasias themselves are kind of horrible. But most of the time they just go home to die.
wow.
And there's no pain meds to send home with them. So like there was a lot that I kind of had to work through myself to
Yeah.
be like, okay, I have to think of this is a different world.
Yeah.
And um, the cat's name was Fluffy, whatever Fluffy is in Mongolian. That was the cat's
Okay.
name. And it was super weird. I don't remember why I remember that. But I was like, okay, Fluffy is not long for this world.
Yeah.
And then a few hours later, they're like, oh, by the way, we have an ultrasound. And I'm like, oh, well, that would have been good to know earlier.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, let's put the ultrasound on and take another look. And there is fluid all around the heart. So
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, well, look at this. Now, well, I'm jet lagged. And now we're like into the afternoon. And here I am with a bunch of people that can barely speak English. And I don't speak any Mongolian, like other than a few phrases. And I'm doing my first cardiocentesis ever
Whoa.
with the crowd. And I was like, okay, yay. Um, and then like, it was bad once again. And so Fluffy went home to die, and I was devastated by this.
Mm,
Um, I also was working with a number of technician students from the US that were
mm,
over there, along with the vets from Mongolia and like their assistants and things like that. So I was there for a month, and I was teaching them all sorts of different things. Like they had no concept of animal behavior. So I
mhm.
love behavior. That's one of my favorite things. So I did a lecture for them on body language, like dog body language,
Mm.
and on cats and that cat body language, because they had this little kitten that was there and it was boarding at the clinic, and it would reach its paws through the kennel like trying to get attention, and everybody thought it was attacking them.
Oh,
And I was like, no, this is
oh,
just play behavior for the kitten. And I went over and I'm opening the cage and they're like, no, 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 it's gonna kill you. And I'm like, no,
oh,
it's just a kitten.
oh,
And so I taught them about that, because like here, like we were talking about how you become a vet. Well, over there, you don't become a vet because you had exposure to animals. You become a vet because your family wants you to take care of their camels. Like it's not
right,
like they didn't have pets.
right.
They actually just started having pets as in household pets in the late 90s.
Wow.
Like so they don't get cats. Like that's like cats steal your breath and they're evil. Dogs are for guarding herds. They're
Right.
not for in the house.
Yeah.
And now they have like now it's crazy because you have all the little designer breeds with their clothes, and it's hilarious.
Hmm.
Um, and but it's still
They
like,
have designer breeds with clothes in Mongolia now?
yeah,
Oh, hmm,
yes, like it does not take long.
right. Yeah.
um, and like specifically at this clinic. Now, one of the other things is that most veterinarians in Mongolia, you go through your entire vet school without touching an animal. And then,
Wow.
so they have a 5-year program. So you come out of high school and you go into vet school, like in Europe.
Hmm.
And you don't actually touch animals until after you finish your coursework. And so after that 5 years, then you'd have a year internship essentially with whatever practice will take you. Like a
Mm,
vet just takes you on. And most of them have never used a stethoscope. They'd never seen a stethoscope.
mm.
When Christian Veterinary Missions went over there, they brought with them deworming medications and vaccines, which
Wow.
they didn't have prior to the early 90s.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's really crazy. And so when you go in and you're like, Here you're like, okay, I need my minimum database. I need blood work. I need
Right.
urine. I need
Yeah.
x-rays. That's not an option. So like, yes, you could do x-rays at this clinic. This is one of two clinics in Mongolia that had x-rays.
Mm.
Um,
And ultrasound.
right. And an ultrasound randomly. Like, I'm like, wait, how'd you get an ultrasound before
Right.
most of the clinics back in the US?
Right.
Uh, but that was crazy. But what I learned was the importance of your exam and history. Like,
Hmm.
you can actually do most of what we do with exam and history.
Mm.
Yeah, the blood work confirms it. Yes, the x-rays confirm it. But if you have a really good exam and history, you can narrow things down, usually within a very small margin of this is what's going on. I think it's
Mm.
this, or this. Um,
What a
and then
great thing to learn, and what a great message to remind our new and early career veterinarians the importance of the physical exam and history. Nothing can replace that. And I
exactly.
imagine that being in a place like Mongolia would really help you fine tune those skills.
Yeah. And then one of my biggest experiences with this is after I went in 2017, I had a dog come in. Um, it was a Chihuahua that had fallen off of a bed, and his brain was herniating,
Mm.
um, from its um, fontanelle. It was an adult, but its fontanelle had never closed. It had fallen off of the bed a few days before it presented. But one of the old wives' treatments is to give copious amounts of vodka to animals. Don't recommend. Don't recommend. So here comes in this dog, like, that's detoxing, and it has torticollis and is rolling horrible, like, rotational and horizontal and vertical nystagmus all at once. Like, I'm like, I don't even know how that works. But I was like, it was making me nauseous just looking at it. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
And so I go on to Vin and I'm like, hey, Vin, what do I do? And everyone's like, well, do you have oxygen? No, no, I
Mm-mm.
don't have oxygen. I mean, technically we had oxygen, but it's in bottles and it's saved for surgery. I can't use it
Mm.
on a patient. I'm like, I have dewormer, I have flea and tick medication, I have some vaccines, I have, I do have IV fluids. um, I can't do blood work.
Yeah.
They're like, can you do an MRI or a CT?
No.
And I'm like, well, no. In fact, if you need one as a human and you go to the hospital there, like, you have to prearrange it ahead of time so that they can bring in technicians from out of the country to actually
Mm.
run the diagnostics, like to run the machine, and then the images get sent out of country to be reviewed and then come back. So it's like a week-long thing.
Um,
So I'm like, no, that's not happening. I'm
so
like,
what
I
ended
do
up
have some
happening with
basics.
this dog?
Well, I asked the staff, I said, is there any chance we can check with the human hospital and see if they have mannitol?
Mm.
And like, Vin kept telling me all these things. They're like, do you have this? I'm like, no, like, none of the things were helpful. And so uh I ask if there's mannitol, and they're like, what's that?
Hmm.
And like, they can't ask the human hospital because they already closed for the night. Because it was almost 7 p.m. And so the human hospital was closed. And they're like, but we have this phone number that we can call to see if it's anywhere in the country. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But if we think of the size of Mongolia, it basically is the US east of the Mississippi River. Like, that's the size of Mongolia. And they have roughly, I don't know, maybe 50 square miles of paved roadways, but it's all in Ulaanbaatar. And like, it's a 5-hour plane ride to the other next largest city, which is tiny, um, or like a 36-hour drive
Wow.
on grass. And I was like, all right, well, good luck with that. And then suddenly I turn around and someone's handing me a bag of mannitol.
What?
And I look at it and I'm like, okay, one, I hope it's mannitol, but it's in Cyrillic. So I don't really know a Cyrillic alphabet. So I'm like, it looks like it could be mannitol. Um, and I'm like, where was this? It was on the shelf at the corner pharmacy half a block away.
Whoa.
And I'm like, what? Like, that's not just something on the shelf at
No,
the corner pharmacy.
right.
Uh, so we gave the dog a dose and then we sent it home for the night because we didn't have overnight care. They brought it back the next day and it got a few more doses. And then I had to leave. And so I checked in the following week. And the next day already, like it was starting to growl at me. So I'm like, it's going to
Oh,
be fine.
good sign.
You'll be fine, little chihuahua.
Wow.
And when I called back later, the following week, or not called back, but I emailed them like, so what happened with this little dog? And they're like, yeah, it's back to normal. It's fine. And then I worked at the ER, like at the level 1 trauma center ER in Wisconsin. And the other doctor, I was working the swing shift, but the overnight doctor ended up taking this case with the same like herniated head thing. Like this, it was, I don't know how I had two of these cases within like 2 weeks of each other. But
Yeah,
anyway,
very bizarre.
right. And this was like a little Maltese type thing. And I don't know, it went in for vaccines that day and it was found to have a broken jaw and the brain was herniating. Anyway, they did everything. They had the MRI, they did all the things, and that dog died.
Wow.
So I'm like, you can do amazing things.
Yes.
So that did remind me, and this is something I want everyone to remember. I think the numbers were something like 85% of things are going to do fine regardless of what we do.
Mm, mm,
And then we have 10% are going to get better because of what we do. 10% are going to not do well. I don't know, 75%, then 10%. 10% are not going to do well regardless of what we do.
yeah.
And then the other 5% is really the area that we can make a big difference.
Wow. I have not heard those numbers, and that is
Yeah,
a
I'll
really
double
interesting.
check the official numbers there because I had heard
Even
that
if
when I
you're in
was
the
in med school.
ballpark, I
Yeah,
mean, it,
it's something silly like that. It's like there's such a tiny amount that we actually
right.
make a big difference
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And those, like, when people get so upset that, oh, I had a bad outcome, we fight death every day
Yep.
and
Yep.
we win most of the time.
Mm, I love
But when
that.
we don't, it's not our fault. It was just time. Um,
We're gonna go back and write that down as a quote from Dr. Melanie because I mean that really I think, for a lot of veterinarians, especially newer ones who are struggling with bad outcomes to really listen
mhm.
to that statement because it is really, really important. And just like you said, you can have all the bells and whistles and the patient might not make it, or you can be in a little clinic in Mongolia and find some mannitol on a shelf. And I would definitely believe that the mannitol saved that dog's life. I definitely remember
Right.
being taught in my neuro rotation by the neurologist that we don't let our head trauma patients die without emptying the bottle of mannitol. And so it can be real life saving. What a story. This is
Yeah.
incredible. I can't believe like time is going so fast. I want to hear so many more stories. I have two that I definitely want to ask you.
Okay.
One is about mentoring. We
Mhm.
are thrilled to have you as a Ready Vet Go mentor.
I'm
Um,
excited.
and- Hmm?
I'm excited.
Yes, me too. We are just so happy to have you. And I know that you love mentoring even prior to, joining us. So how did you come to find yourself in a mentoring position? And what do you enjoy about the mentoring relationship or the mentoring experience?
So I was doing relief, and at one of the clinics I had been going to relatively frequently, and one of their vets had left, and they had just hired a new grad, and the old vet that was going to train her left right before she got there. So they're like, "We need someone to train
Oh
her,"
no. Yep.
and I was
Not
like,
an uncommon
"Okay,
story.
sounds good." And she was absolutely amazing. Like, she barely needed me. I was just there as a backup because honestly, when you graduate from vet school, you have the information. You are so smart. It's just how to get it out of your brain and into the exam room.
Yes.
And I was
Yes.
explaining this to the vet students at the University of Iowa in November is as a veterinary student for them or as a veterinarian, you are the expert in
Mm,
the room. There are what something like 100 and or let's just say there's 300,000 veterinarians around the world. That is less than 0.001% of the population.
mm,
So we literally are the experts. And I told the students they are already experts in the field compared to
yep.
the average person.
Yep.
So yeah, you're not going to be smarter or whatever than your professor or someone that's been in practice for a long time and has a lot more experience. I'm a very firm believer is I will never be the smartest person on any particular topic, and I don't want to be because that's just
Mm,
crazy. Um, but there's always room to learn. And so go in knowing that you do know this. And it's all about learning how to get that across to clients and how not to come off as sounding like you know everything under the sun, being relatable,
mhm,
so that they can understand you and being able to convert the science words to everyday people words.
mhm.
Um, I was really lucky in that I did not know how to study before vet school. That's not the lucky part. Like, I got to vet school and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to flunk out of school.
Yep.
I am so stupid. I don't know what I'm doing. But I literally had to sit there and change everything from the scientific speak that we're being taught into your everyday language because I didn't understand it. And so I'm able to express that to clients a lot easier. I'm
Mhm.
having a lot of analogies for people. like a gastric foreign body is like a ball valve. Sometimes it's stopped up, sometimes it doesn't. And so that's why you have waxing and waning signs. Um, but being able to explain things like that is just really important.
That is so important because, like you said, these new veterinarians come out of school with so much knowledge and they are so smart and they know the medicine. And really, it's translating, like you were saying, everything into their head, out of their
Yeah.
mouths, and into language that their clients can understand. And I just think, what, a gift to these mentees that you have to learn from you and to kind of, you know, learn from the wisdom of the way you communicate. I always encourage my mentees to just steal phrases from other people. Half of what I
Yeah.
say to my clients are things that I took from other vets, people who sat
Right.
next to me in the office. And I was like, oh, I really love the way you say that. And I took it for myself. And I
Oh, yeah.
always encourage my mentees, take my phrases and then come up with ones
Yes.
that feel authentic to you. And
Mhm.
it sounds like you're doing the same thing, which is just so amazing. And it just makes me really happy for you to be able to do that because it's so much fun to be a mentor in that way. And then also really happy for the mentees that they get to have that knowledge and wisdom coming from you, which is just so great. And it makes me even more happy that you're a Ready Vet Go mentor.
I know. I mean, it's crazy. And I really enjoy that. And she still reaches out to me now and then and says, hey,
Mm,
what can I do?
yeah.
I don't know how to explain this. And I love teaching support staff as well.
Oh, yes, that is
I was
definitely
teaching
needed.
someone the other day, like she didn't know how to hold for a jugular vein draw. And
Mm.
I was like, okay, do this, this, and this. And I'm like, how did that feel? And she was like, that was amazing. Why did no
Aw,
one ever show me this before?
right.
And she's only there for a few more weeks because she's moving away, but she was really excited
Uh,
to just have some
yeah,
of
I
that
think
hands-on training.
Yeah, and I think we forget sometimes that in our role as mentors that we're really able to touch the whole staff. And
Exactly.
I think that's
Yeah.
a really important role. And, even the new grads on day one of graduating vet school are in a position to be mentors for the support staff in the clinic. It's a really important role.
And for other
Um,
vets. Like
exact. Oh yeah. Oh my
my
gosh. I
clinic
mean,
in Newfoundland that I go to now, they were so excited that because I go to so many places, I bring things from one practice to another practice.
Yep.
And like, I love transporting knowledge between places.
Yep.
And they were so excited. And even though one of the vets has been out in practice for 30, 40 years, she was so excited to get some of this new information and to
Mm-hmm.
actually see it in practice rather than just hearing about it on a CE lecture.
Yep.
Um, and so recognizing that you as a new grad are a source of information and a mentee mentor relationship is not just give and take. It is mutual and it goes back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be open about what you want and what you need in order to get the mentorship that you need.
Yep.
And
Exactly. I
being
love that.
able to ask for that is huge.
Yes, definitely being able to ask for it. We always jumpstart our mentorship program with a mentee skills training course to really help empower the mentees to take accountability for their own learning and become self-directed learners and practice how to ask for what they want and to really even identify what they want. And I think that is such an important reminder. I mean, the mentors learn just as much from the mentee. I love working with new veterinarians because I've been out for
Yes.
20 years, so I have a lot of new things that I can learn from our mentees. So that's just such a great reminder. Um, I want to end with one final question, which is inspired by your quote that I've heard you say multiple times, which is that we all do better when we work together. So it
Yes.
seems like you are a collaborator, and I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, what role you see collaboration playing in the veterinary profession. How has it affected you professionally, and how do you see us as a profession growing through collaboration?
Well, I mean, mentorship right there, that's a huge one. And that's both with vets and support staff and vets in any stage of their career. Because you can be out for 20 years and just have a really bad experience that shakes your confidence so much that you want to give up, where you might just need some support that says, hey, I can do this to get back into doing it. And if you decide it's not right for you, that's okay too. It's okay to leave and do something else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's huge. When I go into a new clinic, I talk to the support staff, and if there's other vets that are working, I talk to them as well. But I tell them if I say or do something that just sounds completely bizarre, or if you're like, you're catching a mistake that I made on math or whatever, I'm like, tell me, let me know. Like, maybe not, don't say, hey, doctor, you're stupid in front of a client. That's not cool. But stop and say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. Can we readjust? Like holding an animal or whatever, um, or with whatever treatment plan. Um, I think we have a lot to learn and a lot of respect. We should have a lot of respect for our support staff, both uh, the credentialed technicians and the assistants, because they have a lot of experience. And they may catch something that we're not catching because we're focused on this level and they're at this level, but they see things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's important to work with human medicine. I was uh, talking to a friend of mine that's a human ER doctor. He's a DO, and we were talking about what vets wish um, ER doctors and medical doctors knew about rabies and about
Mm.
animal bites. Like,
Mhm.
there's so much that we have so much more training in
Yep.
certain areas that we can have a huge effect on public health in that respect. Um, Working with artists and other areas um, of business, I guess. There's so much that we can learn from them and how we
Mhm.
can improve things, like looking at the psychology of color and the colors that we have in our waiting rooms and in our exam rooms.
Yes.
It's crazy. How can we bring down the stress that's in vet med
Right.
with wall color?
Right. Yeah.
That goes back to my psychology background. Um, but I mean, when I graduated, it was very much this clinic and this clinic had adversarial relationships, and you're stealing clients. And I am very much a believer that clients are their own people. We don't own them.
Hmm.
And they should go to whatever vet they feel is giving them the care that they need.
Hmm.
And I am not the right vet for every person.
Hmm.
I am not the right relief vet for every clinic. And that's okay.
Hmm.
Um, I do have a strong personality in many
Hmm.
ways.
Hmm.
Um, and if I'm
Hmm.
comfortable, you can see that. If I'm not comfortable, I just kind of turn into a little hermit. Um,
Hmm.
one of the things we do in NAMV is we ask if you were an animal, what kind of animal would you be? And like we normally say, what kind of dog would you be? Because we know so much about dog breeds.
Right.
And I'm always like, I'm a hedgehog. Like
Yeah.
I have when I'm anxious or scared, I get very prickly. I curl up in a ball. I protect myself. But
Hmm.
if I'm comfortable, I show my soft little belly. But I can bite and it hurts. Uh,
Right.
and
I love it.
that's just me. And so I don't fit for everybody. Not everybody should have a hedgehog. you
Right.
know? And just knowing how we can support each other in any way,
Yep.
that's how we're going to improve our profession.
Yep.
If we don't do that, our profession has some pretty big challenges. And I think the only way we're going to improve them is
Yep.
collaboration and working together and respecting each other.
Yep. I love that. Yes, thank you so much for saying that and for putting that out there. And I think we are doing our part with the organizations that we're involved with and collaborating together. And I've loved this collaboration with you today and getting to know you more. I think that's a great way to end.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And we have a lot going on coming up, and I can't wait to meet everybody.